an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Warrior's Apprentice, chapters 10, 11, and 12. In these chapters, I think I may be, falling in love with Miles a little bit. Let's age him up 20 years minimum. And yeah, this is so satisfying to read. I just really loved every second of this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Jen for commissioning this episode. And also, thank you, Jen, for being patient as I had to reschedule this more than once because my computer just, completely went berserk and turned yellow and stopped working. So it has been reformatted and is temporarily working, but I have been informed that it's on its last legs for what I do. So I'm going to be getting a new one soon, but for now, as long as I try and take it easy on this one, I should be okay for now. So Jen's is so happy you love Miles so much. I really do. I'm having a lot of trouble, guys, determining a mental image for Miles, and I really am curious if any of you have come up with an actor that you're using in your head. The person I keep inadvertently picturing, and you know what, I'm going to look this up to make sure that I am correct about this, but I believe I keep picturing, yes, the kid who plays Merlin in the Merlin TV series. That's who keeps popping into my head, and I'm not really entirely sure where I'm getting that. But there's just something about that kid that feels a little bit old for his age in his eyes. And he has a really sharp featured, distinctive face. And there's just a sense to him of he's memorable and has a lot of charisma. So that's who I am picturing. And I don't know how satisfied I am with that. But for now, I am really, really loving the way that this story is shaping up because, I came into this, first of all, genuinely surprised that we were jumping ahead. Then we were jumping into Miles' POV, which I just didn't expect at all. And there's also the fact that, and I don't know if, a person wasn't supposed to tell me this, so forgive them ahead of time if they weren't. But I have been told that basically the rest of the series or most of the series is from Miles' POV, which is another thing that I very much was not expecting. So, yeah, this is just a series of surprises, and all of it could have gone quite wrong. There could have been plenty of moments where I was just I don't like this. But actually, I was talking to Owen about this yesterday, how much I feel like getting the books from his parents' perspective adds to the story overall. So let's just get started here. Chapter 10. This is so funny. I love the way that she writes humor because she doesn't dwell on it. And I feel like it's very easy to almost miss how funny things are if you aren't picturing it completely in your mind. But there is a series of we've left people in these rooms and we have to go and talk to them and see what's going on with them. And every time we go, there's going to be another issue with them, trying to break out and escape and them having to get stunned again. There was something very farcical about all of this. And I just could not stop laughing about it. Oh God. Yeah, this is, Miles found the chief engineer and her assistants had nearly managed to sabotage the magnetic locks in their cells. Miles rather desperately had them all stunned again. This whole thing. So Miles is the thing that's really kind of amusing as a reader is Miles' goal in all of this is understandable. But as a reader, we know it's not going to go that way because it's just not. So what he is thinking is, I just have to keep all of these people from revolting against us so that I can get our cargo to where we need to go and not get any more trouble. And once we get there, it doesn't matter what they know about us because we'll be long gone. And I'm reading it like, you're not getting rid of these people, Miles. I don't know how to tell you this. This is your life now. You have inadvertently started something, and that's a wrap on what you had planned. So I sure hope that you can find something to do with like a small private army, because bruh, so this is just so funny to me. The conversations initially in chapter 10 are about like what is going to be done with them. And there's a really interesting moment here. So he's talking to, I think, is it Lieutenant Thorn? Thorn is just being called by the name Thorn. I can't tell if like what their title is, and they keep being called It. I'm going to say It for the sake of the book. I cannot emphasize enough how uncomfortable that is to me. I know I just said like last week, some people prefer It, and that is what they are actually asking for. And I respect that. It feels so in my gut, like dehumanizing and disrespectful, that it's very difficult for me to like get over that and just follow whatever it is this author is directing me to do. So, is your crew sworn to you then, or to Admiral Oser? Michael asked Austin. Sworn? I hold the contracts of everybody on my ship, if that's what you mean. Everybody. He frowned at Thorn, whose nostrils grew pinched. I love this. Thorn is just like, I really am not super happy with this command, I'm just saying. My ship, corrected Miles. Austin's mouth rippled in a silent snarl, and he glared at the nerve disruptor, but as Bathari had predicted, did not argue. So, he says, Miles says, you are, without a doubt, the sorriest excuse for soldiers I have seen in my career. It's a wonder you're all still alive. You must choose your foes very carefully. He rubbed his own still-aching stomach and shrugged. Well, I know you do. And I love that. He says this to Austin just being like, you decided you were going to punch me, the person who is barely like 4 feet tall and disabled. You were going to punch me. So obviously, you piece of shit, you know who to target. And Austin definitely feels a little bit guilty about this. And he says, just trying to stir up a little action. We've been on this damn blockade duty a friggin' year. Stir up action, Thorn muttered in disgust. You would. I have you now. The certainty reverberated like a bell in Miles's mind. I could not help but hear that in Darth Vader's voice. His idle dreams of taking revenge upon the mercenary captain vaporized in the heat of a new and more breathtaking inspiration. His eye nailed Austin, and he rapped out sharply, How long has it been since your last General Fleet inspection? 1.5 years. I don't think I can take any more of this. You're going to have one now. What the hell are you talking about? Who are you? So Austin is just like, I know you're smugglers. You're, like, clearly that's what's going on. I had you pegged. I'm not wrong about it. And when he finally is just like, what are you smuggling? Miles says military advisors. He fancied he could see the hook of his words set in the mercenary captain and his lieutenant. Now, to run in the line. So Miles goes over the ship with this energy, basically, of I am going to ensure everything that I find is a problem. And I don't think it's going to be difficult to make that happen because these people have not been disciplined at all in regard to the maintenance of their equipment, of themselves, of the ship. And there's a really interesting sense of like, I don't want to say hopelessness exactly because I feel like that's too intensely negative, but I feel like we're dancing in that territory a little bit where everybody seems to be, they're so unmotivated, and there's a real like sense of, well, what's the point? It's not like anybody cares whether our stuff is in order. It's not like anybody's checking up on us or even knows about us. Like there's a feeling almost of like they have been neglected for so long and left to their own devices that they have just lost any feeling of importance to their work or pride in anything. And I just thought this was so real to life. And it's something like, Owen, his family owns a, what do you call it? Janitorial company. And it's a really tricky thing to keep people in that job because despite the fact that the work is fairly easy, and when I say easy, I mean simple, not actually easy because cleaning is tough work, but it's simple. You are never around almost anybody and you can wear headphones all day and you can basically come and go when it's best for you to complete the job as long as it's done before the morning when the building opens. So there's a lot of sort of like freeness to the way that it can be. It's really great for people who have schedules that can be a little unpredictable or if they have kids or, you know, like just people who don't deal well with like doing customer service stuff because you don't really have to talk to customers. It's ideal in a lot of senses, but Owen isn't there supervising them. He trains them on how to do the building and he does periodic inspections to keep them on their toes, but like most of the time they're on their own and people are really not good at self-motivating in those sorts of situations. And so their work will be really great initially, trying to make a good impression a lot of the time. Not even then sometimes though. And then as time goes on, he has to do his inspections closer and closer together because they begin to cut corners and they really don't think that anybody's going to notice. And oftentimes they aren't spoken to. If somebody does notice, if the customer realizes like they haven't done X, Y, and Z, it's Owen that hears about it and he has to tell them. So there's a sense all the time to me of like kind of genuine surprise whenever I realize that people are squandering a job that I probably would have really enjoyed at one time in my life. Just the fact that I didn't have to be like working with customers and that there was a sort of like flexibility in the schedule. It feels to me like it's very rare and you should be like more intent on keeping a job that has this sort of flexibility. But instead, what happens is that people just completely, like without somebody breathing down their necks, they lose focus and they don't push themselves when it comes to time. So there will be occasionally a job that's supposed to take 2 hours and it'll be 4 hours and they're putting in on their time card that they were there 4 hours. And Owen is like, no, you shouldn't be. Like, what the fuck is taking 4 hours? And it's because they're dicking around, you know? So this sort of like the headspace here, and I really understand it because like I am somebody who also, I have a flexibility in my job, but because of the way Spoil Me is and that there is like a schedule that I have to keep to for showing up to recordings and reading, that really helps keep me in line, that there's another person sort of waiting for me and observing whether I'm there or not and on time and posting. And also the people that I record with for the other shows, I have to, follow a schedule for that. So there's some flexibility, but there is still a real sense of you're answering to somebody, and there's a sense of accountability. So this is just so lacking that these people have really started to like just slip in terms of all of their standards. So he and he has the engineer as well, like pretend to be somebody else in a way. I don't mean to say that he has a different name. I'm sorry if you can hear the dog. There's probably a delivery showing up. But he asks him to channel one of the people that used to like be a really hard ass instructor at his own school who nobody liked, but who was always right, which is also part of probably why they did not like him. And it's a great scene. I'll get to it later because I don't want to paraphrase. So there's the whole issue with the pilot and having to explain how he died. Because Miles has replaced that like sort of chip in his head, there is no discernible cause of death. And a lot of them are one person initially assumes that it was like a disruptor blast. And they think like, all right, well, that was instantaneous. There's probably nothing we could have done. And I am really curious if that is going to be a secret that is kept. I hope so. I don't feel like it helps anybody to find out what actually happened. But God, it's just so grim the way that all went down and how much Bothari seemed to like enjoy himself. It's just hideous. So Miles says, I want every piece of equipment in here operating properly by tomorrow. I'll send you the engineering technician later today. In the meantime, you can start putting this place in an order more like a military sickbay and less like a broom closet. Is that understood, medtech? He dropped his voice to a whisper like the hiss of a whip. The medtech braced to attention and cried, Yes, sir. Austin was flushed. Thorne's lips were parted in an expression very like appreciation. They left her pulling out drawers with trembling hands. And later on, Elena suggests that Thorne may have a bit of a crush on Miles. And frankly, I get it. Like, it's so funny because Miles really thinks, I'm just faking it all. I'm just making it up. It's not real. They're following somebody, and like, yeah, he's lying about a lot of who sent him, what his role is in a greater scheme of things. Like, all of that is certainly a lie. But I think he's going to be really surprised as he ages and sees more of the world. Everybody's only ever making it up. That's all we do. And like, there are times where you can be trained to do something that has been done before and you follow that training. But for me, I'm like, what I do, for example, for Unspoiled, this is not a thing that I have seen done. I just had to do what I felt like I should do and like tweak it a whole lot along the way until it became something. And if you come at a project like this or a group of people like this and you just have a certain attitude and a tone, and you indicate that you are noticing details and they can't get shipped by you, you are setting a standard. And whether or not you're making up the overall goal, you're still creating a crew that respects you and follows your orders and has their shit together. So I am just very amused as this all goes on that he always is vaguely afraid, unsure of himself. There are times where he's just like, I didn't expect that question. Jesus Christ, what do I say now? And he always comes up with something every time. There are people doing real jobs that have handbooks that don't have an answer to questions. And he's just making it up out of his ass completely from scratch, and he's got answers. And if he doesn't, he has a good enough answer till he can get a real answer. It's truly very impressive. So this is the point where he is talking to... first he talks to Bothari, who is basically like, I don't get how you're going to stop them from retaking the ship. And Miles is like, that's the thing. We aren't going to stop them from retaking it. We're going to make them feel like retaking it isn't what they want to do, and buy into this other story that makes them feel like they didn't fuck up so badly they got basically pwned by a bunch of nobodies. We beat them, and they are, he says, what do you think we'd rather believe, or they'd rather believe, that we are great or that they're a bunch of screw-ups? Isn't it plain? Just watch. He skipped a silent dance step, composed his face to a mask of sternness, and strode after his prisoners, his boots ringing like iron down the corridor. But the crew's quarters were, from Miles' point of view, a delight, because they are a disaster. Bothari did the disassembling. His instinct for turning up evidence of slovenly habits and concealed vices was uncanny. Miles supposed he'd seen it all in his time. When Bothari uncovered the expected bottles of the ethanol addict, Austin and Thorne took it as a matter of course. Evidently, the man was a known and tolerated borderline functional. The two kava-weed dopers, however, seemed to be a surprise to all. Miles promptly confiscated the lot. He left another soldier's remarkable collection of sexual aids in situ, however, merely inquiring of Austin with a quirk of an eyebrow if he were running a cruiser or a cruise ship. Austin fumed, but said nothing. Miles cordially hoped the captain might spend the rest of the day thinking up scathing retorts too late to use. Oh my god, it's so good, y'all. I just love it so much. This is just such competence porn. It really is. Okay, so he goes to Thorne's chamber, which comes very near to passing inspection, which I am not surprised because Thorne is clearly a rule lover. I sympathize. Austin appeared to brace himself for a rampage when they came at last to his own cabin. Miles smiled silkily and had Bothari put everything away after inspection in better order than he'd found it. It was all those years as an officer's Batman, perhaps. When they were done, the room appeared quite transformed. From the evidence, or lack thereof, Austin himself appeared to have no serious vices beyond a natural indolence exacerbated by boredom into laziness. Indolence is such a good word. Yeah. So they're like picking up personal weapons that aren't, allowed. I'm putting that in quotes according to this standard that Miles has decided on. He made an elaborate show of noting each substandard item and checking it off against a list of owners. Exhilarated and inspired, he waxed wonderfully sarcastic. The mercenaries squirmed. Then he goes to an arsenal and he's like, do you store these weapons uncharged? And they're like, yeah. And he points it at them and pulls the trigger but moves it at the last second. And he's like, oh yeah, uncharged. Really good policy. Look at that. And everybody's just like, fuck. And you hear Thorne mutter, told you so. Austin growled wordlessly. I love it. Putting people on the defensive and making it feel like you are a professional and you are coming in here with a standard that you feel is baseline and they aren't even close. Yeah, you get everybody into a place where they are trying to please you, and it works for such a long time compared to what Miles thinks he's going to be able to sustain, because obviously these people are kind of hungry for this. It's interesting how this happens, but I understand it with myself as well. I simultaneously want to defy demands, especially when it's like, well, we're going to be meeting at this time and doing this much, and that's our schedule and that's what we're sticking to. And I just kind of want to be like, yeah, but fuck you. However, I can acknowledge that I thrive under those kinds of conditions. I really do. And it's so frustrating to be the kind of person who simultaneously gives it the finger, but also needs and respects it in its way. Trying to sort that out, especially as somebody who is self-employed, it's a constant battle. So I really feel this desire that these people have sort of despite themselves, you know? And there have been times in my life where there was something I was forced to do, and I really didn't feel like it was going to be the right call in the moment. And I made myself do it because I had to. I had to show up for work, or I had to do a certain like workout or whatever. And afterward, I was like, no, that was the right call. If I had been left to make the decision myself, I wouldn't have done it, because I would have thought that's too difficult, or I'm not up to it today, or whatever. And I was really wrong. I just kind of had to push through. The trick is figuring out the difference between the days when you're just telling yourself and the days when you genuinely need a break. And that's not always easy to figure out. So this is when he talks to Baz, and he's like, I need you to go around and be absolutely appalled. And Baz is like, actually, they're not really doing that bad, and I think they're going to spot me. And Miles is like, no, you don't let them ask questions. You demand, and you get them to answer the questions. And didn't you ever have an engineering commander who was a real son of a bitch that everybody hated, but who was always right? Imitate him. And the response from Baz is so great, you guys. He says, they'll never believe me. I don't even have a cigar. It's the cigar. That's the part that he's hung up of, just like, how am I supposed to do the job if I don't have a cigar? I don't smoke either. And Miles says, yeah, you don't want to smoke this. It might be spiked with something. Just chew on it. It's fine. So he says, you're an air polluting son of a bitch, and you don't take I don't know for an answer. If I can do it, you can do it. Baz paused, straightened, bit off the end of the cheroot, and spat it bravely on the deck. He eyed it a moment. I slipped on one of those damn disgusting things once, nearly broke my neck. Tarski. Right. He clenched the cheroot between his teeth at an aggressive angle and marched into the main engineering bay. I can't tell you how much I love this, and I am very interested in seeing whether or not he keeps up this whole thing with the cheroot, because I feel like that's the sort of thing that you're going to get really sick of if you don't actually smoke or like the taste of tobacco. But if it becomes your signature, you're not really going to want to put it away because it's part of like your image now. And this is a guy who it seems needs an identity. And I could see him sort of like really latching onto this in an unexpected way because it's something, you know? So he meets with everybody, Miles. And again, you guys, he says that he's a representative of the Dendari Free Mercenary Fleet, and somebody says they never heard of it. And immediately his response, if you had, heads would roll in my security department. We do not advertise. Recruitment is by invitation only. It's giving Tom Haverford, but like good at it. If you guys don't know who I'm talking about, Parks and Rec, there's a character named Tom who he has a club, and he decides like he's somebody who really buys into marketing stuff, and he understands how powerful it is because it works on him. And so he opens a nightclub, but he pretends that they're always like full and that they don't have like, or not a nightclub, it's like a consulting firm. And he keeps telling people like, sorry, we're so booked, we aren't going to be able to do an appointment that day, but we can do it the next day. The problem is that he does this so much that they never actually take any new clients because he's so like attempting this exclusivity thing so hard that he just shoots himself in the foot with it because he's an idiot. But exclusivity and acting as if like, well, this is an invitation we're extending, that shit works. It just does. And He says, frankly, if what I've seen so far represents your general standards, but for our assignment here, you'd have gone right on not hearing of us. Ah, guys, this is so good. We do not normally draft recruits, particularly from such dismal raw material. After yesterday's performance, I personally would have no compunction at disposing of you all by the swiftest means, just to improve the military tone of this ship. They looked nervous, uncertain. Was there just the slightest hangdog shuffle there? But your lives have been begged for you, upon a point of honor, by a better soldier than most of you can hope to be. He glanced pointedly at Helena, who, prepared, raised her chin and stood in a sort of parade rest, indicating to all the source of this unusual mercy. Which is kind of ironic, because I feel like last episode I was thinking how glad I was that Helena wasn't just begging for their lives and saying enough with the violence. But as soon as I thought that to myself, the next paragraph starts with Miles wondered if she wouldn't have personally shoved Austin at least out the nearest airlock. And he has set her up as a good guy, but that's not actually like really who she is exactly in this scenario. And I was like, all right, you know what? I really enjoy this actually. Captain Austin has yielded your contracts to me. That stirred them into outraged murmuring. A couple of them rose from their seats, a dangerous precedent. And for a moment, he's like, oh, how am I going to stop this? Because I can't let them, Bothari brought his disruptor to aim with a good loud slap against his other hand. Bothari's lips were drawn back in a canine grimace, and his pale eyes blazed. The mercenaries lost the moment. The ripple died. Those who had risen sat back down carefully, their hands resting plainly and demurely upon their knees. And Miles is just like, I wish that I could be that intimidating, but I think in order to genuinely be that intimidating, you have to be somebody who enjoys wreaking violence, and I am not, so that's why it works. So really, Bothari is like the only one that's going to be able to do this. An obviously nervous person with a lethal weapon had a brand of menace all their own, and more than one mercenary spared a glance from the sergeant to the other possible source of crossfire. A male mercenary attempted a prudent, placating smile, palms out. Elena snarled under her breath, and the smile winked out hastily. Good for you, girl. So, what he does here is he sets everybody against each other by saying, I am going to be watching you over the next few weeks, and I'm going to be determining who to promote, and there is a possibility that one of you is going to be captain of this ship. And just basically gets all of their ambition alight, the possibility of change, just change alone, whether it's really good or bad, with people who have fallen into the kind of stupor that these folks have, is always going to be something that sort of galvanizes. And when he's asked what his rank is, he says Mr. Naismith again. And this is when somebody asks, when do they get copies of the Dendari regulations? And he just says, tomorrow I'll have copies distributed. And I was like, how are you going to write something that fast? But what he decides to do, which is brilliant, is get a copy of the military, I don't remember what it's called, but I'll find it later. And from Barriere, and just cut it up and take things out of it, which is really, really brilliant. Somebody else asks about pensions and retirement plans, and what he says essentially is that he'll come up with a brochure, but for now they should all be glad they're still alive, and if they want more than that, they're going to have to prove they deserve it, which is vague enough, but also feels in line with how severe everything has seemed, that it's believable to me. Commander Elena Bothari has a list of your assignments. See her on your way out. Attention. Dismissed. He caught a snatch of sotto voce conversation as he marched out. Homicidal runt lunatic. Yes, but with a commander like that, there's a chance I might survive my next battle. He recognized the something else in their faces suddenly. It was that same unnerving hunger he had seen in Mayhew's and Jessic's. It generated an unaccountable coldness in the pit of his belly. And I was surprised by the coldness. I sort of think maybe that's coming from him feeling like that's a lot of responsibility to take on for something that isn't real. In his mind, it's not real. I stand by that it, yes, indeed is, but he doesn't intend it to be. And I can understand how intimidating it probably is to like take responsibility for that. But also, you seem quite capable of handling it, my guy. Not to say that it will be easy, but I think you're going to be able to do it. So, oh yeah, here it is. The copy of Barryaran Imperial Service Regulations. And that's what he is going to cut out. Those are old regulations. When those gutless slugs get a look at the old discipline parades, Miles grinned. Yeah, if they saw the specs for those lead-lined rubber hoses, they'd probably faint dead away. Don't worry, I'll update them as I go along. Your father and the general staff did that 15 years ago. It took them 2 years. Well, that's what happens with committees. He is not wrong. He is not wrong. I understand why things are done the way they're done, but my God, it's so frustratingly inefficient. And I'm talking about our own government in this case, obviously, but you know. So Elena comes in and says, I got them divided up, so now what do I do? And she says, all right, go to the gym. I want you to take your group and do a phys ed class and conditioning and start teaching them what Bothari has taught you. And she starts to say, I've never taught anybody before. And he says, listen, all you need to do for the first 2 days probably is just be like, fight each other and then walk around them and be like, Jesus Christ. Oh God, really? And just wear them out. Don't give them time to think or to plan things. Just get them trying to make you happy. It's only for a week. And he does, if I can do it, you can do it, which he just keeps using over and over. And he's saying this again with a sense of like, I kind of am lying when I say this, but he's not though. That's just how the world functions. You, Sergeant, take your group and start them on weapons drills. If you run out of Barryaran drills, the Ysaran standard procedures are in the computers. You can filch some of them. Ride them. Baz will be running his people into the ground in engineering, spring cleaning like they've never had before. And after I've gotten these regs straightened around, we can start quizzing them on those too. Tire them out. My lord, there are 20 of them and 4 of us. At the end of the week, who do you think is going to be tireder? My first responsibility is your hide, damn it. I'm thinking of my hide, believe me. And you can best cover my hide by going out there and making them believe I am a mercenary commander. You're not a commander, you're a bloody hell of a director, muttered Bothari. I deeply love that. He's right in general, but like that's the thing about stuff like this. That it's so frustrating, but so true. Leadership is like 80% image and illusion, you know, and 20% true competence. And the thing is that you can't keep up that illusion without that competence being like really true and there. But the image is just so much more of it than I ever really want to believe it is. I want the competence to be the main thing, and it's so not. It's just not. But, you know, honestly, when it comes down to it, what's going on with Miles is he's putting people that are capable in place. And whether or not they're up to the standard he is pretending they are at, he's choosing well. You know, not like he has a ton of options. These are the people he is stuck with, granted. But he happens to be surrounded by people who are pretty decent at what they do. So he's lucked into a nice little cabinet for himself, really. So he has to do this whole editing job, and it takes him so much longer than he expects it to because there's a lot more to cut than he had expected. I love this. Even wholesale slaughter of chapters such as those detailing instructions for the Barayaran ceremony of Emperor's birthday review left an enormous mass of material. It was the closest look he had ever given to military regulations, and as he meditated on them, organization seemed to be the key. Get huge masses of properly matched men and material to the right place at the right time in the right order with the swiftness required to even grasp survival, to wrestle an infinitely complex and confusing reality into the abstract shape of victory. Organization, it seemed, might even outrank courage as a soldierly virtue. And this is why I am obsessed with planning ahead, you guys. It's just 80% of the battle with anything, even if it's not a battle. I don't care. And I understand how some people can't do it, but you are just shooting yourself in the foot. And I find it to be like truly shocking when I was like out in the world doing regular jobs, you know, at the number of managers who didn't manage. They would show up and they would make a schedule and they would fuck off. And it's like, you have people here. Some of them are very good at specific things and they suck at other things. You don't get to treat them like they're interchangeable cogs because they really aren't. And also there are days that are busier and not, but you wouldn't know that because you're never on the fucking floor and you don't understand what the most popular items are. So you're under ordering for things, or you're not prepared for the holiday that's coming or whatever. Like, people just, all you need to do is consider a fucking calendar and the personalities involved, and you're practically there. It's not hard, but people don't do that. And I don't get it. You're just hurting your own performance. You know, it's making you look bad, especially considering how many managers get bonuses if they have like a lower than expected budget for the staff. Why wouldn't you try and be as efficient by planning ahead as possible? If you are trying to get that bonus, again, you're just fucking yourself over. So eventually he does it. He calls himself a space pirate. Classic. Miles did his best to be seen everywhere that day cycle. He re-inspected sickbay, gave it a grudging pass. He observed both Elena and the sergeant's classes, trying to look as if he were noting every mercenary's performance with a stern appraisal, and not, in truth, nearly falling asleep on his feet. He squeezed time for a private conversation with Mayhew, now manning the RG-132 alone, to bring him up to date and bolster his confidence in the new scheme for holding the prisoners. He drew up some superficial written tests of his new Dendari regulations for Elena and Bothari to administer. The mercenary pilot officer's funeral was in the afternoon. And he tries to like do this with the kind of gravity that it deserves. And I really appreciated that he takes the time, because it's not just something that is probably important to these people who knew the pilot, but it is just an indicator of the kind of person he is to everyone. Let's see. Thorne, pale and silent, observed the sharp turnout with a strange gratitude. Miles was rather pale and silent himself, and breathed an inward sigh of relief when the pilot officer's body was at last safely cremated, his ashes scattered in space. Miles allowed Austin to conduct the brief ceremonies unhindered. His most soaring thespian hypocrisy, Miles felt, was not up to taking over this function. Very good call. So he then has some time alone. He's talking to Elena, asking whether or not they seem to be buying it. And she says that not only do they seem to be, but they're making up their own explanations for why things that seem strange aren't actually that strange. So evidently, Dom thinks that he's undergoing rejuvenation treatments and that he's actually way older than he looks. And that's why he was on Beta Colony. And so there's just a sort of like, yeah, that's why he looks so young. And he's like, well, those treatments, those aren't even like real. And she says, yeah, I know they're not, but a lot of people don't. That's like a really well circulated rumor. And And then he says, well, Thorne has to know better. And she says, Thorne knows better, but is not contradicting it. So I really like that, because what I think is happening is that in some ways Thorne is seeing through some of the lies, but Thorne recognizes that Miles is so good at this that they are just going to let him go ahead and take over, because this is what they have been craving. And they're like, finally, somebody is fucking stepping up. If he is full of shit about a few things, or if people are making up things that I know aren't possible, whatever, as long as they're listening to him, you know? And let's see, she says, about Baz. He knows your account, son, since you swore him in as an armsman. And he thinks you're about his age, and that your father disinherited you and exiled you to get you out of sight. And he's like, oh, you know what? That kind of makes sense. And she has a moment of like, don't get mad at him. And he's like, no, I'm not. That I get it. You have a younger brother who has usurped your rightful place as heir. And he's like, huh, okay, that's not bad. He's in exile himself, isn't he? She asks quietly. Father doesn't like him, but he won't say why. I won't either then. It's not my business. But he's your liegeman now. All right, so it is my business. I just wish it weren't. But Baz will have to tell you himself. Her look softened. I knew you'd say that. Oddly, the non-answer seemed to content her. And she asks how everybody was with their combat training, and she's like, some of them are actually quite good. And then there are people who never expected to have to fight at all, clearly. So I'm having the people who are good training the others, and he's like, that's exactly what you should be doing. Perfect. And at first, when she says here, I'm doing so many things I never dreamed of, he starts to like be like, I'm really sorry I got you into this, but I promise I'm going to get you out, and don't be scared. And I was like, Miles, are you even listening? Are you hearing her at all? It's remarkable. He is so competent at some things, and then when it comes to Elena, he just misjudges all the time. I need you to get your head out of your ass, Miles. For fuck's sake. She isn't complaining. She's not. That's not the tone of this at all. And she says, I feel more alive than I've ever been. You make anything seem possible. The longed for admiration in her eyes perturbed him. It was too much like hunger. Elena, this whole thing is balanced on a hoax. If those guys out there wake up and realize how badly they have us outnumbered, we'll crash like... It's not balanced on a hoax. You balance it. Isn't that what I said? When was the last time you slept? And then she's like, well, what about eating? And he's like, oh, God, who knows? Whatever. And finally, she has Bothari come in. Because he is just like walking back and forth. He doesn't want to sit because he feels as soon as he does, he won't be able to get back up again, which is correct. That is how that works when you're this tired. And Bothari comes in and just pours some whiskey down his throat, basically, and is like, okay, now go to sleep. And he tries to be like, no, I can't sleep. And then he does sleep. And apparently he goes out for 16 hours. Chapter 11 begins a week later. He was still in command. This is, again, one of those moments that I thought was like really well written. So they're reaching their destination, and yet things don't seem quite right. And he is just feeling like, I don't know about this. So he's asking whether or not the codes are being recognized, and Dom is saying yes, but he's got a vibe of like, this isn't right. I don't think so either. And then they get a transmission, and they're saying we drove off an attack by the Pelians a few weeks ago. And it appears this person is actually speaking back and forth with Dom, but there's a sort of odd, like, flickering interference that keeps happening. And they're attributing it to what's going on the ground, but it feels like, to me, it was very suspicious. And I kind of quickly thought, I wonder if this is a recording. And Miles very quickly notices that there is a statue of a horse on the desk of this person that is shifting place. It's sometimes on the right and sometimes on the left. And he finally puts together that this is a trap. This is a synthesized conversation. He's been pre-recorded, and they're using the like fake interference to cover up the fact that the recording jumps here and there. And Dom says he wouldn't betray, and Miles says they probably had a fair amount of time to prepare. There are lots of ways to break a man. I bet there was an attack by the Pelians a few weeks ago, only it wasn't driven off. So Dom, of course, is saying, what do we do? And what Miles decides that he's going to do, brilliantly, is turn to Thorn and say, this is a really great time for you to show me what you're made of. How would you handle this? This is it. This is the thing. And what is so good about the way he handles it? Because if I were him, what I would say was like, what do you suggest? And I would expose the fact that I don't know, right? I would make it like, we're collaborating here because you're my peer. And you can't do that in this situation. You must maintain that hierarchy. So to make it sound as if he knows and he's testing her, that's very good. So I keep saying her. I just realized that. Testing them. I'm using the wrong pronouns. I don't know why I assigned she, her to Thorn. Like, where did I even get that from? So Thorn says, Trojan horse, ambush their ambush and take the station from within. And Miles says, all right, well, once you do that, what do you, you've committed yourself and there's an immobilized base. And Dom says, we can arm the refinery and cannibalize the power sats, time permitting. Maser scramblers? I thought you said you were smuggling military advisors. Miles quickly raised his voice and overrode this. Remember that personnel are in short supply and definitely not expendable right now. Well, the defending ships we need to worry about are almost certainly Oseran. The Pelian shipbuilding capacity is way under par. They don't have the biotech for jump ships at all. And we have the Oseran codes and procedures, but they don't know a thing about our Dendari ones. Our Dendari? Miles' mind echoed. Very well, trainee Thorn, go ahead. Thorn said R. Thorn's in it. Thorn is in it to win it. I love it. Sergeant Bothari gets assigned to go with Thorn along with Jessic and is not very happy about it. Thorn, dazzled with visions of captaincy, dashed out, followed by the drafted advisors. May I also point out that while I promised trainee Thorn a command, I have not said of what ship. An officer must be able to obey as well as command. To each his own test, to each his own reward. I'll be watching you too. There's only one ship. You're full of assumptions. A bad habit. You're full of... Austin shut his mouth with a snap and gave Miles a long, thoughtful stare. Yeah, you better. Just watch it, buddy. And I love how he winds up winning Austin over a little bit later. So, we have this moment where they're about to go out into this fight, and Miles wants to go. They don't even have a suit that would fit him. And Bothari is just like, you're absolutely not doing it anyway. I'm not going to fucking let you die in the midst of all of this. And I love Miles asking, what if I had like passed officer training exams and I was in battle? Like, what would you have done? And he just says, I would have retired. And I was like, that actually, yeah, that makes sense. So Miles goes over to Elena, tells her to hang back for his own reasons. Miles. You're supposed to be observing everybody's efficiency and reporting to me, which you can't do if you're in front. And she just says yes and thank you. And then after a moment, thank you, Miles, for the honor. And really seems to mean it. And I just love this, like he's putting her in this position where she's actually getting to really do something and make something of herself. And it clearly just means so much to her. And even though it's clear that she's frightened in the rational way that you should be, she is not frightened like, for example, I would be. She's ready for this. And I am just so impressed because I could never. Do me a favor, Commander Jessic. Would you stick close to Elena? Absolutely. I'd follow her anywhere. Said Miles. That hadn't been exactly what he'd meant to convey. Could you now? How old is Baz? What's up with that? That felt like something. I don't know. So eventually Baz is like, you didn't mean the thing with the commander promotion, right? And Miles says it's as real as the Dendari mercenaries. Baz's eyebrows lifted. And what does that mean? Well, a person I knew once said, meaning is what you bring to things, not what you take from them. He was talking about Vor as it happened. Carry on, Commander Jessic. And Baz calls him in response Admiral Naismith, which really has a ring to it, doesn't it? So this is one of the first moments that him and Austin have a real sort of like meeting of the minds, where they're observing this fight and Austin asks, how much would you give to be out there? And he says about 15 centimeters of height. A breath of a genuine laugh escaped the mercenary officer as if against his will. Yeah. His mouth twisted in agreement. Oh, yeah. I felt that. I just thought that was like, so it was so understated, but it really, you get a lot from just those words. So at this point, Miles is asking how this system that tracks every individual suit and person works. And evidently there is an override where you can actually control the suit if you need to, in the event that somebody is injured and you have to pull them back to the ship, something where they are unable to have control in a way that is threatening their life. And when he asks them how often they've used it, Austin says twice, which evidently, they had been expecting it to be like, you're super experienced with this, but Austin is barely going to be more experienced than they are after this is over. And he says, like, we were on that blockade duty so long. Everybody likes a bit of easy work, but maybe we were on it too long. That was my impression too, Miles agreed blandly. So, Miles is realizing, is there a way, by any chance, that we can override the suits of our enemies by hacking them? And it turns out, indeed, there is. And Austin is thinking, oh, sweet, you're just going to have them like shoot each other and take each other out. And Miles is like, no. You're trying to do like brute force. I want to do something a lot more subtle. So he goes to this one guy's suit. He pinpointed the reservoir from the man's pilot relief tube, already half full. Must be a nervous sort of fellow. He set it to backwash at full power and checked the audio transmitter. Savage swearing filled the air briefly, overridden by a snarl calling for radio silence. Now, there is one distracted soldier, and there's not a thing he can do about it until he gets somewhere he can take the suit off. Austin, beside him, choked with laughter. You devious-minded little bastard. Yes! Yes! He pounded his feet in lieu of his hands and swung about in his own seat. Remember, subtle. Right. There. Every third servo command now operates on a half-second time lag, and his weapon will fire 10 degrees to the right of where he aims them. Very good, Miles applauded. We better save the rest till they're in critical positions and not tip our hand with too much too soon. Them bonding like this is just delicious. I loved this. It was so much fun to see how excited Austin got. This man is clearly also bored, and it's interesting that he's like trying to get a bit of action, as he was saying, with like trying to beat Miles, but it's not necessary that it be hand-to-hand action. This is something that's very different, and it's clearly kind of scratching that itch for him. So I'm kind of having to jump ahead here because God knows I am behind on how I am taking way too long covering these sections, you guys. I'm sort of wondering if we should cut them down a little bit further. But there eventually is this ship that pops out of nowhere, and everybody is just like, where the fuck did that come from? And Miles realizes that there had been like a feedback that should have made him understand there was a monitor nearby, that if he hadn't been so focused on making a distraction, he wouldn't have himself been distracted. So they're calling for surrender. It's that snob tongue. He's from Earth and never lets you forget it. He has 4 times our shielding and firepower, 3 times our acceleration, 3 times our crew, and 30 years experience. I don't suppose you'd care to consider surrender. You're right. I don't care for it. I love he's from Earth and never lets you forget it. Evidently, that's like pretty high in the pecking order. I'm curious to learn more about that. So at this point, Miles is thinking, maybe we could ram them. And Austin, who considers this ship his baby, is like, I am fucking not using something that is this complex and intricate and beautiful as a battering ram. And Miles is like, I'm sure they wouldn't expect it. Oh, God. It's got to be at least tried. Not with my ship, you don't, you little... My God, look, cried the communications officer. The RG-132, torpid, massive, was rolling away from the docking station. Its normal pace drives blared at full power, giving it the usual acceleration of an elephant swimming in molasses. The RG-132 loaded has 4 times the mass of that pocket dreadnought, which is why it flies like a pig and costs a fortune in fuel to move. That pilot officer of yours is crazy if he thinks he can outrun Tongue. And Miles realizes he's not trying to outrun him. He's going to pin him. And that is indeed what he does. The RG-132 drifted off. Miles stood before the tactics room screen and stared in stunned fascination as half the freighter's outer hull delaminated and peeled into space. Uh-oh. So... The RG-132 was the final detail to be mopped up in the capture of the metals refinery. Thorne's commandos smoked the last of the Osarans out of their crippled ship and cleared the outlying structures of resistors and refugees. The wounded were sorted from the dead, prisoners taken under guard, booby traps detected and deactivated, atmosphere restored in key areas. Then, at last, the manpower and shuttles could be spared to warp the old freighter into the docking station. And I love Mayhew just flipping out and saying they're bent. And Miles is trying to like congratulate him here. But he says, look at the damage. Baz says they have the equipment to rig some sort of hull repair. You don't understand. They're bent, the Necklin rods. Are you sure? The housings... You can stand in the housings and look up the rods and see the warp. Actually see it. They look like skis, Mayhew wailed. Miles, although he already knew the answer, turned to the engineer. Any chance of repairing? Baz and Mayhew both gave Miles much the same look. By God, you'd try, wouldn't you? Said Mayhew. I can see you down there now with a sledgehammer. I love this because I don't need to know what these rods do or how they work to understand like how delicate they clearly are and important and crucial. So the tone that he takes here is so correct for somebody who like has been in this line of work and knows and can see that this kid has no idea. Like it's just, there's so much character built into the reaction that he's having. I love it so much. Couldn't we take the aerial? Break through the blockade? Oh, sorry. The murdered pilot's ghost breathed a cold laugh in Miles' ear. A pilot without a ship without a pilot, cargo not delivered, no money, no way home. Why did you do it, Artie? You could have just surrendered. You're baiting. They'd have treated you all right. Mayhew looked around the docking bay, not meeting Miles's eyes. Seemed to me that Dreadnought was about to blow you all into the next dimension. True. So, well, it didn't seem right to me. A right and proper armsman ought to be sitting on his ass while that was going on. The ship itself was the only weapon I had, so I aimed it and... He then inhaled and added with more heat. But you never warned me. Never briefed. I swear, if you ever pull a trick like that again... A ghostly smile tinged Bothari's lips. Welcome to my lord's service, armsman. You guys, I was like genuinely touched at this moment. I really was. I really just, I don't think I realized how much it bothered me that Bothari didn't like him. And it's fun in ways that he doesn't like him. And I'm sure this isn't just going to be like, you know, them being buds now or anything. But it is just a moment of such approval. It's very, very satisfying. So they have taken some casualties, obviously. And Thorn comes and reports all of this to Miles. And Thorn says, on the bright side, we found a little help for our personnel shortage problem. We freed 23 Felician prisoners, a few military types, but mostly refinery techs kept working at gunpoint. A couple of them are a little messed up. How so? Later. I'll be making a complete inspection. I'll bet you will be. That's his new thing. Inspection. That's just what he does. So, finally we meet Tongue. Austin, I thought you were dead. How did they take your ship without... The prisoner began and stopped as he assimilated Thorn's armor. Austin's, in light of his immobilized arm's decorative sidearm, their lack of guards. His expression of amazement changed to hot disgust. He struggled for words. I might have known. Oser was right to keep you two clans as far away from the real combat as possible. Only the comedy team of Austin and Thorn could have captured themselves. Hold your tongue, Thorn called, and added in an aside to Miles, if you knew how many years I've been waiting to say that. And Tongue says, sit on it, Thorn. You're equipped for it. Tongue... They both lunged forward simultaneously. May I point out, Captain Tongue, that the comedy team has just captured you? If half my commandos hadn't been trapped by that sprung bulkhead. Austin straightened and smirked. Thorn stopped flexing on its feet. United at last, thought Miles, by the common enemy. Who the hell is that little mutant? Tongue muttered to his guard. In fact, you've done so well, trainee Thorn. I have no hesitation in confirming you in your brevet command. Congratulations. Thorn swelled. Austin wilted, all the old shame and rage crowding in his eyes. Miles turned to him. You have also served, trainee Austin. Even while on the sick list, and for those who also serve, there is also a reward. He gestured grandly out the plexiport where a free-fall crew with cutting torches was just beginning to untangle the Triumph from its entrapment. There is your new command. Sorry about the dents, and perhaps next time you will not be so full of assumptions. And Austin is so happy. It's so amazing, you guys, how much everything is just like, well, I have it to give because I fought you and took it. So now it's mine, and giving it to you is me doing you a favor. Like that it shouldn't work. It really shouldn't, but it does. And all he has to do is really seem to believe in his own right to owning it and being able to assign it to whoever he sees fit. It's remarkable how much it's just fucking swag, you know? So Tongue starts to flip out, and Miles says, you probably want to give him a little tranquilizer. Tongue was dragged away. An aggressive commander, Miles thought covetously. 30 years experience. I wonder if I can do anything with him. Yeah, Miles, let's see you try and manage him, because he's going to be a little trickier, I feel. And I'll be very interested to see how you do that. Would you say we've earned our combat bonus today, sir? Said an engineer. Combat bonus? And he just says, I should think so. Some of us were wondering, just what is our pay schedule going to be? Bi-weekly or monthly? Monthly. Oh, she said, sounding faintly disappointed. I'll pass the word along, sir. What if we're still here in a month, my lord? Asked Bothari as she left with Jessic. It could get ugly. Mercenaries expect to be paid. I'll figure something out. Oh, God. So then Thorne pops in and says, okay, so about the counterattack. And he's like, what? What? Who's attacking? And Thorne is like, well, it's not. I mean, they're not, but they're gonna, right? Like, of course, there's bound to be. Shouldn't we plan for it? And Miles is like, oh, yes, of course. And you have an idea? Several. Thorne began to detail them with verve. Miles realized he was absorbing about one sentence in 3. Very good, Captain, Miles interrupted. We'll have a senior officers meeting after inspection, and you can present them to everybody. Thorne nodded contentedly and dashed off, saying something about setting up a telecom listening post. Elena says, what's the matter, Miles? You don't look happy. We won. A true Vor, Miles told himself severely, does not bury his face in his liege woman's breasts and cry, even if he is at a convenient height for it. And that is the end of chapter 12. So, this just... You guys, I loved this section so much. Like, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, we have a crew assembled of like ragtag misfits. But man, she's really good at making me feel that these are ragtag misfits for real. And the way that Tongue reacted to Austin and Thorne, making it sound like nobody has ever taken them seriously and they're seen as a joke. Oh, especially Thorne clearly wants to do well. And I feel like Thorne is... The vibe I'm getting is that Austin also actually wants to do well, but there's so much more resentment in Austin than there seems to be in Thorne, that it's kind of choking his performance out of him. And that is something I really, really strongly relate to. So I'll be very interested in hearing what the history is with them eventually. Okay, I am so over time. I have got to stop. But I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for bearing with me as I rescheduled everything. Thank you, Jen, for commissioning this one. And there will be a recording tomorrow as normal. So thank you all again. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.